The night the storm rolled across the Alaskan Valley, wildlife biologist Dr. Rowan Hale thought he was alone, until a shape emerged from the tree-line, towering, silent, and trembling in the rain. A massive brown bear stood there, not charging, not warning, but pleading. Its breaths came in ragged bursts. Its eyes locked on him with a desperation no textbook had ever prepared him for. Then it turned, walked a few steps, and looked back, waiting, beckoning, almost begging. Rowan felt his pulse spike. Whatever this bear wanted wasn't to attack him. It was to lead him. Rowan hesitated only a moment before stepping toward the giant silhouette waiting at the edge of the meadow. Every rational instinct warned him to retreat. No bear behaved like this, not in any field guide, not in any case study he'd read in 12 years of wildlife work. But something in the creature's posture pulled him forward. Its head was low, not in threat, but in exhaustion. Its breaths came quick and uneven, sending pale clouds into the cold air. This wasn't dominance. This was fear. And fear rarely brought a predator this close to a human unless something was terribly wrong. "Easy," Rowan murmured, raising his hand slowly. The bear didn't flinch. It simply shifted sideways, revealing a narrow game trail carved through the grass. Then, with a low, guttural moan, it stepped onto the path and glanced back at him. A clear, deliberate gesture. A gesture Rowan would have sworn no wild bear could make. His boots sank into sodden earth as he followed, each step punctuated by the soft hiss of rain on pine needles. The bear moved ahead with surprising restraint, never gaining more than 20 feet of distance, never vanishing completely into the brush. It was guiding him. Rowan felt that truth settle in his bones like a weight he couldn't shake. After several tense minutes, he saw it. Something small and dark lying near the edge of shallow ravine. At first the shape seemed lifeless, a shadow cast by a broken branch. But when Rowan crouched, the truth hit him like a blow. A cub, barely breathing, tiny paws trembling, foam collecting at the corners of its mouth. "Oh no, little one," he whispered. The adult bear emitted a low rumble that vibrated through the ground beneath Rowan's knees. Not a warning, an urgency, a command without aggression. Rowan's heart hammered as he slid his field kit from his belt. The cub's pulse was rapid but fading, its muscles twitching in sharp spasms. Poison. It had all the signs. He'd treated foxes, hawks, even wolves with those same tremors. He looked up at the massive bear towering over them. "You brought me here," Rowan breathed. You knew he needed help. The creature's only answer was a soft, trembling chuff, raw, vulnerable, and unmistakably hopeful. Rowan's hands moved on instinct, even as cold rain threaded down his sleeves. He slipped a thermal pad beneath the cub's tiny body, shielding it from the icy ground. The adult bear hovered just a few yards away, its breaths heavy and ragged, as if each second it waited cost a piece of its strength. Rowan forced himself to stay calm, though his pulse felt like a drum inside his skull. "Stay with me. Just breathe," he murmured, checking the cub's pupils. Glazed, slowly active. The trembling in its limbs was worsening, a wave of neurological distress sweeping through its fragile system. A toxin this strong was no accident. Something in the valley, bait, runoff, contaminated fish, was spreading poison through the ecosystem. And this cub had been one of its victims. The adult bear paced in a tight arc, massive paws pressing deep into the softened soil. Not once did it roar or snap. Instead, it let out low, rhythmic moans, sounds Rowan had only ever heard from grieving animals. It wasn't threatening him. It wasn't challenging him. It was pleading with him. He drew a syringe of vitamin K1, the first step in counteracting internal bleeding. The adult froze, muscles coiling. Rowan held his breath. "I'm helping him," he whispered, voice barely a thread. "I promise." With practiced precision, he slid the needle beneath the cub's skin. The tiny body flinched weakly. The adult bear's rumbling grew louder. Fear, not anger. Rowan pressed a steadying hand to the cub's flank. "Easy, we're okay. We're okay." Minutes stretched into something that felt like hours. He administered charcoal slurry with a flexible tube, wiping foam from the cub's muzzle, monitoring each shallow breath. Wind pushed through the trees behind him, scattering water droplets like silver sparks. Finally, the cub's spasm slowed. Its breathing steadied, still fragile, still perilously shallow, but steadier. Rowan let out a long exhale he hadn't realized he'd been holding. When he looked up again, the adult bear was staring at him with an intensity that stole the air from his lungs. Not wild, not instinctual, something deeper, something that lived in the space where fear and trust collided. "You understand," Rowan whispered, awed. "You really understand." The bear blinked once, slowly, deliberately, then stepped closer, closing the distance between them with a grace that felt like an act of faith. The rain thickened into a steady curtain as Rowan lifted the cub into an insulated sling. Its small body felt fragile against his chest, each shallow breath a reminder of how close the wilderness had come to losing one of its own. The adult bear watched every movement, muscles tense, eyes burning with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "We need shelter," Rowan murmured, wiping rain from his brow. "He won't survive out here." For a moment, he expected resistance, some primal instinct to keep the cub close. Instead, the bear backed up several paces, clearing a path through the wet grass as though granting permission. Rowan's breath caught. It wasn't just allowing him to take the cub, it was trusting him to. The walk toward base camp felt endless. Mud sucked at Rowan's boots, the storm wind cutting through his jacket like shards of ice. Each time he stumbled, the bear paused behind him, as if afraid he might fall and drop the precious bundle he carried. Once, when Rowan's knee buckled, the bear stepped so close he could feel its breath against his back. Warm, steady, anchoring. "You really are coming with us," Rowan whispered without turning. When the faint glow of camp lights finally appeared through the mist, Rowan radioed ahead. June rushed from the truck, drenched, eyes wide as saucers. Rowan, is that a real bear following you?" "Don't move," he warned. "He's not aggressive. He's worried." They transferred the cub to the back seat of the truck. June handed Rowan the larger medical kit, her hands shaking. "This is insane," she whispered. "What if he charges?" Rowan looked back through the rain. The adult bear had stopped at the tree-line, sitting heavily, as though the weight of the storm and the fear pressing on its chest were too much to stand beneath. It didn't roar, didn't pace. It simply watched, unblinking, drenched, waiting. Rowan met its gaze, his voice steady despite the tremor in his throat. "I'll bring him back," he said softly. "I swear." A low chuff rolled from the bear's throat, soft, almost fragile. Then Rowan slammed the truck door shut as thunder cracked overhead, carrying them both toward a night that would test every instinct he'd ever trusted. The truck rumbled through the storm, the headlights cutting through sheets of rain that hissed against the windshield like 1,000 whispers. Rowan's thoughts were tangled in the whirlwind of the night's events. Everything had happened so fast, and yet each moment felt engraved in his memory. The adult bear had followed them, never too close, but never far enough to lose sight. Its silent vigil felt like a promise. When they reached the wildlife station, June was already inside, preparing the space for the cub. Rowan's hands were numb as he carefully transferred the little bear to the examination table. The cub was still unconscious, its fur damp and sticking to the skin beneath, but its pulse had steadied, and there was a faint fluttering beneath the small chest. Life, even if it was fragile. Rowan adjusted the four-line, checking the vitals. Every moment felt like a desperate gamble. The poison coursing through the cub's veins was insidious. He'd seen it before. Eagles, foxes, even wolves brought low by the same toxins. But this was different. The trust between him and the adult bear was different. It was a bridge built on something deeper than science, deeper than instinct. It was a bond forged in survival. As the night dragged on, the storm outside intensified. Rain pounded against the roof like an endless drumbeat, and the wind screamed through the trees. In the sterile glow of the station's lights, Rowan watched the cub's shallow breaths, hoping with every ounce of his being that he wasn't too late. Minutes stretched into hours. June moved quietly, checking on the medical equipment, glancing at Rowan as he worked. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. The silence between them spoke volumes. They were fighting to keep this cub alive, but it wasn't just the bear they were protecting. It was something else. Something unspoken. A promise made to a creature that had trusted them, that had led them to this moment. Outside, the adult bear still watched from the shadows. Its massive form was a sentinel in the storm. It wasn't just waiting for the cub, it was waiting for Rowan too. The morning arrived quietly, as if the entire valley had agreed to hold its breath. A thin veil of mist drifted above the golden grass, and the sky glowed with the soft amber of a rising sun. Rowan stood at the edge of the forest clearing, the cold air forming delicate clouds with each breath he took. His hands rested gently on the transport crate where the cub lay, fully awake now, blinking curiously at the world beyond the metal gate. 2 days of fever, trembling, and danger had transformed into something Rowan hadn't dared to expect: strength. Or at least the promise of it. The cub shifted eagerly, tiny paws tapping against the crate floor, as if he could sense that freedom was near, just beyond the morning light. Behind Rowan, June adjusted the final telemetry tag readings. "Vitals are perfect," she said softly. "He's ready, Rowan." But Rowan didn't answer at once. His gaze was fixed on the tree-line ahead, because just beyond the mist, half-hidden but unmistakable, stood the adult bear, massive, silent, and unmoving. The morning light caught its fur, turning it into a bronze silhouette carved from the wilderness itself. It wasn't pacing this time. It wasn't roaring. It was waiting with a patience that went beyond instinct. A kind of patience found only in the quiet ache of a parent who has suffered too much to hope easily, yet still does. Rowan swallowed hard. He came back early today. June followed his stare and nodded slowly. It's like he knew. Rowan crouched beside the crate and unlatched the door with careful, steady movements. The hinge creaked softly. Inside, the cub tilted his head, studying Rowan's face for a long moment, as though trying to understand what came next. Rowan's chest tightened unexpectedly. "Go on, little one," he whispered, voice low and thick with emotion. "He's been out there waiting for you." The cub hesitated just a second, just long enough for Rowan to feel that fragile connection between them. Then, with a soft grunt, he took his first step onto the dew-wet grass. Another, and then, suddenly, he was moving with the clumsy urgency of a young creature desperate to return to the warmth he remembered. Rowan rose slowly, not wanting to break the moment. The cub scampered across the clearing, the mist swirling around his tiny legs. And when he finally reached the enormous figure waiting for him, the adult bear lowered its massive head and breathed against the cub's fur with a tenderness that didn't need words. The cub pressed into that vast chest as if he had never been away at all. A shiver moved through Rowan, not from cold, but from awe, the kind that sits deep in the bones and makes the world feel far larger and more mysterious than any human study can explain. June exhaled softly. That is one of the rarest reunions I'll ever see. Rowan didn't speak. His throat had tightened too much for words. Instead, he watched, letting the sight etch itself into his memory like a photograph burned into film. The parent bear wrapped its massive body protectively around the cub, nudging him, sniffing him, reassuring itself that the little heartbeat it feared losing was truly there, alive, warm, safe. The dawn wind carried a faint, rolling rumble from the adult bear's chest. Not a growl, a chuff, deep, resonant, a sound Rowan had learned to interpret without translation. Recognition, gratitude, a promise kept. Rowan removed his hat and held it by his side. "You trusted me," he murmured, voice cracking. "I hope I've earned that." For a long moment, the adult bear lifted its head and met his gaze across the clearing. There was no fear, no barrier, no divide between species, just a shared understanding, raw, ancient, and honest. Then, as the sun lifted higher, the bear nudged the cub gently toward the trees. Together, they turned and disappeared into the thick underbrush, two shapes merging into the endless wilderness. Rowan watched until the very last rustle faded, until the valley returned to silence. Only then did he finally let out the breath he'd been holding. June stepped up beside him. "Think you'll ever see them again?" Rowan smiled faintly, eyes still on the tree-lean. "I don't know," he said, "but if I ever do, I'll be right here, ready to listen," because the wild had spoken to him once, and he knew now that it spoke only to those willing to hear.